he kind of set the bar at a certain level. And for me, I thought, well, I'd like to also make a difference. Maybe I can make a difference in an area where we didn't necessarily have too many people that we could look up to. And I thought if I could get involved in the arts, then, maybe we could start shifting the perspective and the stereotypes.
And how difficult was it for you at the start, being non-English background, and also this field seems to have selected people who can sort of, like, it's very limited to make it to the big scene.
It's very much like you get there and you're kind of surrounded by people who have come from the best schools. They've either come from like Shaw or Skeggs or one of those schools, or everyone knows them because
they're acting schools.
No, I'm saying they've come from like the best schools, like the best segments of society, or everyone knows them because they were a little kid on set. That was someone's daughter or someone's son, and so it's a very exclusive, very tight-knit community. It's very hard to break in, especially when I came at it having studied something completely different at university.
What did you study?
I did commerce with a major in marketing, a minor in economics at Macquarie University. And so that was totally unrelated. And I kind of came at it not having done drama at school, not having done music at school. I came at it just with a really keen interest in actually telling stories. So it was really difficult at first because, you need an in, and I didn't have an in at all.
Except your determination and your commitment to make it. But what's the key that inspired you and told you, I want to be an actor and I want to succeed? What really triggered?
When I looked up Lebanese actors or actors of Lebanese descent and saw how very few there were. And it made me think how much, when I was growing up, I almost tried to move away from my Lebanese-ness because I thought it was only a bad thing. I thought it was a terrorist or a criminal or, something bad, because that's what the media had told me it was. And that's what, the schooling environment that I was in, unfortunately, we didn't have that many, in the media at least, we didn't have that many people to look up to. We had all these people who were doing great business work, great doctors, great lawyers, people doing really good stuff, but it wasn't reflected in the media. And so because of that, it made me think that I didn't have a place in the media, or I didn't have a right to want that. And all of a sudden I started to develop this, this passion for it, because I was like, well, we're going to shift the story then. We're going to tell a different story. And it wasn't until I met a woman named Doris Unane, who I had always, because of the perception, because of her involvement in the Australian industry, she'd always been positioned a totally different way. It was never really about her being Lebanese. They kind of tried to remove those sorts of elements of her and kind of homogenize her. And I met her and I was like, wow, this woman has been doing this for years. And I never knew that this was someone that I could have watched and supported from a young age.
Right. So as an inspiration, as a role model actor, who impacted you the most out of all the famous and well-known actors?
That's interesting, because it was actually not really an actor per se. There was a man, and I guess he'd written a book. I can't believe his name escapes me right now, but he'd written a book about the depiction of people of Middle Eastern descent, specifically Lebanese people, in film. And I can't believe I can't remember his name right now.
It happens sometimes.
Yeah, but he'd written this long book, and it was all about, and he started to tour this at universities. This was like a very well-educated academic, speaking about how come in American films, someone who is Middle Eastern is always depicted either as villainous or to laugh at, or as being, not aesthetically pleasing. There was so many negative stereotypes that had been created that seemed to align with certain policy. So it was this really big thing of, I was reading this guy and he was, you know, a lot older now and not really talking about it as much. But this was a guy that grew up totally westernized, totally assimilated into the culture, much like myself. But then when it came to his later years, his tertiary education, started to see, you know what, why is it that I feel ashamed of this, you know, this incredibly rich and ancestral history that I have? And I was such a huge fan of the fact that he was talking about this stuff. You know, he really put himself out there when he didn't have to. He could have just kept going along with it and being accepted into Western society, much like myself, but he chose to actually take a stand.
Julian, to go from commerce to acting, and we all know how much acting require of skills of knowing the script, the emotional part of it, all those things. How much you think you have developed those skills to make it through as far as you have, and hopefully even further in the future?
I think work ethic for me is everything, and that means, you know, doing something over and over and over again, which you can only learn having to go through university, having to fact check, having to write essays and do all the referencing. You know, you start to just really get a love for the process. So whenever I had the good fortune of being involved in something acting related, I treated it very much like, this is work. I've got to do it a certain way. I've got to, you know, cross my T's and dot my I's. And, you know, a large part of my education was factored into that. So I've always come at it from a very different angle, where I do all the hard work and the preparation, and then once I get to set, you kind of forget about it all and you just let the fun happen, and you let things take shape. But you got to do the work for it, and that's why I'm so lucky that I had a really good education.
In Australia, what's the biggest thing you've done before you left for the USA?
I would say getting Fighting Season and Romper Stomper, shooting them in the same year, and then the next year was pretty much all press. Like, it was all press for Romper Stomper or Fighting Season, and they were the two biggest competing networks. So that was like a crazy introduction into that way of life, which again was something that I was totally foreign to myself. But the most interesting thing about that was that it eventually eventuated into something far deeper, and that was my involvement in mental health, which is something that is hugely important to me. But I was, you know, got to the point where I was on live television on Sky News, you know, talking about mental health, and it was such a huge connection because it was so related to the show, to Fighting Season, you know, where we dealt with PTSD, but it was also, hey, there's a lot of men out there, we need to start talking about this stuff. So it was really important.
Julian, you had difficulties here of being, because you're of Lebanese background. Now you've moved to Los Angeles, to the USA. How difficult or how easy is it that the USA will accommodate someone who is Australian of Lebanese background? Now, there's the two backgrounds.
I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Incredibly difficult, because there is, again, an idea of what, and this is, I see this term as derogatory, but of what an Arab actor is, right? And that's what I was referred to as. But I was told that I wasn't diverse enough to be, quote unquote, an Arab actor. But as well as that, I didn't have blonde hair and blue eyes, and therefore I couldn't go the Caucasian route. So I fell into a crack where I'm not, for the era of diversity, didn't necessarily seem diverse enough, but also did not appear to be, you know, overly Caucasian. So again, fell into this confusing little trap. Now, I don't necessarily, you know, think that this is something that's exclusive to myself, but we just find ourselves in a very polarizing time where there is a push for diversity, but unfortunately, because it's in its early stages, it tends to tread the line of tokenism, where we want to get someone that is specifically, this is our Middle Eastern person or our quote unquote Arab person. And that is a seriously narrow way of looking at it. And unfortunately, you're grouping together a huge region that is largely at war with its,
Yeah.
and you're kind of saying, no, well, that's our person from there. Great, we can tick it off, and take in the fact that I then have an Australian accent and am, Western in that regard. And it was really disenchanting, but, part of the process.
Julian, there's a lot of American producers and directors from Lebanese background. Have you met any? Have you tried to interact with any of them in the USA? I'm talking about.
I actually chased up. There was one young woman who was putting together this association. So basically, with all the stuff we're talking about diversity, she was trying to push this agenda of, making sure that there was proper representation of people from anywhere in the Middle East. And I had a long chat with her, and we spoke about a few. There's a few big names right now, really big names in directing in America of Lebanese descent, but they, and I'm without mentioning names, they didn't want to be aligned with this push for diversity because they considered themselves Caucasian.
Right.
So it's like,
is it a business thing, or
I think it is, because I think for the generations prior to us, there has, and there definitely is, and I had been instructed this way, there was a push to hide your ethnicity, or your background, because it could be used against you. So I think there's those people who are now coming to power and actually have a lot of power. It's hard because they don't want to lose it, and then all of a sudden become aligned with any sort of faction, which I can actually really relate to. It's just that it really does get to the point where you kind of either keep hiding it and you're not really being authentic, or you just start speaking about it, and I dare say there's been people in the past that have started to speak about this, and well, yeah, I read an article the other day about the guy who played Aladdin in the latest Disney live action remake, and he's not necessarily killing it as far as auditions and opportunities goes, and this was $1 billion grossing film.
Wow. Julian, what can you tell us about Entrenched? That seems to be one of the major highlights of your career so far.
I can tell you that producing it was the greatest experience of my life so far professionally. It's because, Joey wrote such a great script. Joseph Shabbat.
Yeah.
He had such a great script, and he's such a great director that when you watch this short, you're literally on the edge of your seat the whole time. You don't know what's going to happen. And we were lucky enough to tour this film all throughout Los Angeles, all throughout California, actually, and see the Americans' reaction to it. And the military is a huge thing. Defense is a huge thing in America. So they're a lot more invested in that setting.
So the theme was more military.
So it's 4 soldiers in a stakeout situation.
Just for the listeners.
Yeah, 4 soldiers in a stakeout situation in Afghanistan. A young boy finds his way into the room, and it is the argument/debate that ensues, that follows.
How long does it go for?
I think it's 13 minutes.
Right.
And basically it's not just about the boy. There's obviously so much political discourse and themes that are tied into it.
I can see your face light up when we brought up Entrenched.
Yeah, because I think it's in that whole year of living in Los Angeles, despite the lack of opportunity, Entrenched gave me an opportunity because we were able to tour it, to actually go to the film festivals, to speak to other people in film and realize, wow, there's actually some really good people coming up in the industry that are going to change things. And, to be able to align with them and compete against other great films like that, that was literally the saving grace for me. And that's where whatever networks I've established have come from Entrenched. And then just to think about what Entrenched was like a whole family, with the crew and putting it up, creating it from the ground up. Not to mention my little cousin, Jacob, plays the little boy.
Wow.
And, that's such a great opportunity because, again, he's growing up in an environment where like drama, music isn't really a thing. He's actually going to the same school I went to.
Was it filmed in Australia?
Yeah. We actually, there was a heritage building in Paddington that used to be an acting school. It's a small green screen studio, and we just built a set over a few days.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a great experience.
Congratulations once again on winning the award for best short movie. Khalil Gibran. I heard you mention him. And I heard you, and I've read some interviews. How much is Gibran has an impact on your thoughts, on your philosophy?
It's huge because it started off subconsciously because my parents would read or quote certain things from the Prophet when I was younger. And I never really knew much about who the author was, but they would talk about elements from this, from his book. And it wasn't until I got to America that I started to see it everywhere because I would hike every day. It's the only way to get away from all the craziness there. So I'd hike through the hills. There was one hill that was called Mount Hollywood, and that was in Griffith Park. And I got to the top, the summit of it, and there's this one bench there, and there's a cedar tree on it. One bench, on this massive place, and there's a quote from Khalil Gibran there, and I'm like, what is this doing here? And then that started to push my research into his life, into his work, which sent me over to Lebanon. And then back, and then Joey and I were actually writing a script together in Los Angeles based around some of the Khalil Gibran works. And it's just become this thing where I actually see a similarity and relate and resonate with someone of Lebanese descent and see how important it is to carry on that legacy.
Wow, that's very impressive. And got two more questions.
Yep.
One is regarding the hero of Lebanon, Yusuf Karam. Yusuf Karam, as you know, fought the Ottomans.
Yes.
At one stage, he was outnumbered. He had to stay away someplace, and he did stay. What a small world! In your grandparents' house, Karam al-Mahr.
Oh, I know the story.
Okay, what do you know about the story? And
well, from what I know, this bloke is a hero, right? And I find it incredible what he was able to overcome, and the fact that he sought refuge and found a place where they looked after him, quite a small place actually, and I was able to visit it in 2011. It's just that unfortunately my recollection is skewed because when I went to go and visit this little house in Karam al-Mahr, the ceilings were quite low, and I got knocked out. Unfortunately, being a taller guy, I walked straight into one of the low door frames, and I blacked out. I have no idea what happened there. All I know is it was a beautiful area, but now I know why it was so small, because it literally
for the horses.
Yeah, and they were able to protect this man in his time of need. So I consider it even more of a beautiful place now, knowing that it knocked me out and it protected someone. So it's a pretty strong little house.
Julian, this is the first English book about Yusuf Karam.
Uh-huh.
I give it to you as a gift,
Thank you.
and I hope that it will impress you enough to one day maybe make a movie about this man, yeah, and win an award.
Thank you very much.
Julian, what's your advice at the conclusion of this very, very interesting interview? What's your advice to young generation, to young people uh, willing or thinking of joining the acting and movies and films?
My advice would be that it's scary at first when you look at the fact that there's not many people who have come before, but that doesn't mean that you can't be the first, or that we can't amalgamate our skills and our efforts and actually combine it to smash through the glass ceiling that's already there. Just because it hasn't happened before doesn't mean that it can't.
Julian, I thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and effort. I know that you're flying back to the US soon, yeah? And we wish you all the best. We are honestly proud of you, and we're looking forward to seeing you in more movies, more success, becoming an international star. And all the best. May the Lord always be with you.
Thank you.
We wish you a Merry